Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Tim. He's a Bigfoot researcher from Western North Carolina. And how's it going today, Tim?
I'm doing great, sir. How about you?
Oh, man, I'm having a great day. Just got back from Oregon, so kind of getting back into the swing of things. But I heard about you through our mutual friend, Mr. Harley Owens, from down there in eastern Tennessee. Bigfoot reports and data. And yeah, it's just a pleasure to meet you. And it sounds like you've got some really interesting things you've been involved with since about 2008.
Yes, sir. Since 2008, I have had four sightings, and I've had just tons, and I mean tons of interactions with them throughout the years. Most of my areas, I keep stuff going. Anything I see they do, I undo so that I can keep the interactions going.
So yeah, take us back to the beginning, how this all started for you and how you first realized that, yeah, there's something going on out here.
Okay. The way it started is actually kind of funny. There was a guy moved in up above me. His wife family has other land here in the county that I live in, and they had moved up from Florida. And I was actually outside skinning a deer. I'd been deer hunting, and I'm skinning my deer out, and this guy comes up and he says, "Hey, my name's Newsom Corbett. I just moved in the hill up here, and I'll get back with you." I say, "You like to hunt and fish? I like to hunt and fish too." I mean, just talking so fast I couldn't hardly keep up with him. And he said, "I'll see you in about 2 weeks." And he went back to his truck and took off. And my wife walked up and said, "Who in the world was that?" And I said, "Well, I've got, his name is Newsom Corbett. He just moved in up here, and he likes to hunt and fish and sees that I do too. So he's going to give me a call in a couple of weeks and you know, just see if we become friends or whatever, just hang out." So in about 2 weeks, just true to his word, he showed up and he said, "Let's go fishing." I said, "Okay, let's go." So we headed out, and he was talking to me and talking about the property that they have up here. It's 86 acres surrounded all by national forest, and it is actually locked behind Forest Service gates. They are the only ones, them and the Forest Service are the only ones that have access to the gate. So he said, "It's going to be a good place for us to hunt. If you'll help me put out feeders and all that kind of stuff," he said, then we'll start hunting up there. And I told him, I said, "Yeah, that'd be awesome. Just let me know when and what." So he told me, he said, "The first thing we got to do is play a trick on my boys." And I said, "Okay," not really knowing what he meant. And he said that they had snuck a set of fallow deer horns out of the cabin into the front of his trail camera. And whenever they done that, they just stuck the horns around so you couldn't see nothing but the horns. And he seen that picture, and he was like, that was actually back when trail cams had the 35 millimeter cameras in them. And so he went and got it developed, and the first thing he sees is that deer. And he said, told his wife, said, "I've got to get in the woods. These things ain't common around here." He said, "I ain't coming out of the woods till I do." And she said, "Did you look at any other pictures?" He said, "No, I ain't got time." And he was throwing beanie weenies and vienies and all that crackers and stuff in the buggy. He was getting ready to go sit on the deer stand that evening. And she finally got him talked into going and looking at the pictures. And the very next one is his boy, both of his boys and their friends holding those deer horns. And he told me, he said, "So we have got to pay them back." And I told him, I said, all right, for some reason I remembered this. At the time I hadn't thought about it in years, but I told him back in the 70s, my dad had, one of his friends was hunting, and they come across some tracks in the snow that was barefooted. My dad's friend is about probably 6'5", 6'6", wears a size 13 shoe, and it was bigger than his shoe. And in one of the locations in this county called Standing Indian, it's a big campground in National Forest and all of that. And they had seen that track back in the 70s, and I told Newsom about it. And I told him, I said, I tell you what we'll do. I'll make a set of those tracks. And whenever I get those made, we'll go up there and we'll put some tracks out, and we'll just have some fun with them. And he said, yeah, that'll work. So we did. We went up there and put tracks down in the mud and broke a few limbs and stuff like that. And honest to goodness, I never would have thought of a Bigfoot around here. If they truly was something, I figured they'd be out west somewhere. And so we done real good and made up some stuff for them to find. And now his boys that was in their mid-20s, so, it's not like little kids or nothing. But he said, I'll come up with them tomorrow, and we'll go with them and see what they think. And I told him, I said, you'll have to go by yourself, because I'll get tickled. I can't hide myself that good. And so I stayed at the house, and he went up and they walked right by the tracks to start with. And he told him, he said, no, yins ain't getting me again. I see this track yins made. And they said, what track? And he said, this one right here. And when they seen it, they just freaked out. Oh, Lord, Daddy, we've got Bigfoots on the property. We're going to have to get every trail cam we can buy and get in the woods and get pictures of them. That'll be worth a lot of money. And they just took it hook, line, and sinker. And so they had a band at the time, and they had to play that night. And they was actually going to cancel their gig and get in the woods. And Newsom told them, said, no, you've got to honor your word. So they went on to their gig. And while they was at the gig, Newsom was with them, of course. So I snuck up there and messed things up on the porch, turned chairs over and threw clothes on top of the house and all of this stuff. And whenever they got home about 2 o'clock in the morning, they called their dad and told him, said, that thing's been back up here while we was gone. So the joke went over real big. And the next day, they finally figured out it was us. So everybody got a good life out of it. And me and Newsom started putting feeders out and that kind of stuff. And there was a hog rooting his yard up. So we got up in the top of the loft of his little cabin and waited on for it to come out one evening. And the spot where it sat has got creek and laurel bushes real heavy around it. And there was 3 raccoons come out of the laurel bushes and out into the yard. And they fed around there in the yard for a few minutes and then turned around and run back in to the bushes. And when they did, one of them grabbed one of the raccoons. At the time, we didn't know what it was, but it grabbed one of the raccoons and started killing it. And I don't know if your listeners know what that sound is like, but it's a terrible sound. And the coon quit squalling, and all of a sudden you just heard a big wah, and everything went dead quiet. And I looked at him and I told him, I said, buddy boy, I know every animal in these woods. I have seen black panthers. I have seen the red wolves that we have that they turned back in the 50s, turned out in the 50s. I said, I have seen all of that. And this one I can't explain. Number one, it wasn't a dog because there was no barking. Whatever jumped on that coon, a big sized coon puts up a pretty good fight. So I knew it wasn't a dog, and I knew it wasn't somebody, and I knew it wasn't a bear because the roar that it does, a bear don't make that kind of roar. They're just more huff than anything. And we were sitting there, talking real quiet about what it could be, and then it started whistling. And I told him, I said, buddy boy, I do not know what this is. I said, the sound that it made, I don't know. And for it to start whistling after that, I definitely don't know what it was. And it would whistle every few seconds, and about every 10 to 15 seconds, I'd say. And we decided we'd go outside and see what we could see. And when we turned the lights on in the top loft of the cabin, it quit whistling. And we went outside and never heard it no more, never thought that much about it. And from then on, things started happening. The more that we was up there, the more things would happen. We would put up feeders, cut trails through the woods that we wanted to deer, where we wanted to deer hunt. We'd make us a trail, and we would come back, and brush would be piled up on the trails going to our deer stands. Our feeders would be messed with, the trail cameras would be messed with, that kind of stuff. So we started paying a little bit more attention to what was actually going on. And, you know, we started to realize that these limbs and stuff that are been carried in, they've been wrung off. They've not been broke by or nothing like that. They've not been chewed on or anything like that. They had actually been just like somebody had took their hands and ripped them off the trees. And the more, like I was saying, the more we was up there, the more stuff that we had happen. We was putting one of the feeders up, and I'm holding the ladder for him, and a rock hits behind me. And it's in the middle of winter, so we know there's no acorns falling, nothing like that, nothing else it could have been. And I asked him, I said, did you drop something? And he said, no. I said, I think I heard something hit behind me. And he said, yeah, I did too. And so we started just being a little more cautious and looking around. We never did see anything. We went back up to that same feeder a few days later and was going to fill it back up. And we started putting the corn in it, and one yelled, and it done the long drawn out yell like Bobo does on Finding Bigfoot, that big long draw. And it was so loud that it just made your whole body shake. And when it started, we thought it was actually an airplane coming across the ridge real low, because the Forest Service had been doing some mapping and for logging areas and stuff. But when it tapered off, we could tell it wasn't but about 50 to 70 yards above us. And that was the first, other than the growl, the roar that it did when it got the coon, that was the first vocalization that we heard. And it really got our attention. You know, we didn't slow down of what we was doing, but we started paying a lot more attention, taking pictures of stuff that was happening and that kind of stuff. And that went on for years. I mean, every time we would go up there, we would have some kind of interaction, whether we was getting yelled at or stuff being placed in our trails going to our deer stands. And like I said, messing with the feeders and the trail cameras. And I was up there one evening, me and Newsom was deer hunting, and I'm sitting there and I hear two people, what I thought was people at the beginning, start talking. And I could understand everything they said except the language. It was a language I'd never heard of. And I texted Newsom, that was on a Tuesday evening, and I texted him and I told him, I said, I hear somebody on your property. I said, I can tell that there's two of them, but what they're saying don't make any sense. I've never heard that language before. And I have got Native American Cherokee in my family, so I have actually heard their language, and honestly was a lot like Native American language, but with monkey gibberish thrown in, you know, grunts and and that kind of stuff, and squeaks and everything. So he told me, he said, well, sit still until it gets dark, because whoever it is will have to turn their lights on to get out. Well, we sat till way after dark, and no lights ever come on. So we just decided to leave, and then we was back in there on Thursday of the same week, and it happened again. And all of this is happening, so we're starting to put the puzzle together that there's actually something up there, especially once we heard the big, long, drawn-out yell that it does, or howl, whatever you want to call it. I had actually heard Bobo do that on Finding Bigfoot, and when I heard that, I thought, well, that's exactly what Bobo does. And I told my buddy, I said, you may have some Bigfoots up here. And he was like, you reckon? I said, well, things is sort of adding up that way. And for about 2.5 years, every time we would go in, they was either throwing stuff or putting stuff in our trails. My buddy passed away, and I lost rights to go onto the property. But until we quit going on his property, we were still getting stuff put in our trails. I mean, tops of pine trees broke out and drove into the ground. Big bushes and trees broke over the trail. The yelling and rock throwing and stuff stopped after about 2 years, but messing with our trails and our cameras and stuff, that continued up until he got sick in, I think it was 2020.
Tim, I definitely have a few questions for you. This is, I mean, a really incredible area, it sounds like, and I'm sorry that you lost your friend as well. That's just extremely sad to hear that he has passed. There's probably a question that a few listeners are thinking, so I'm going to ask it.
Yes, sir.
What was it that... Did you ever have the thought when this first started that, oh, is this just a retaliation prank? Or what was it that made you think, okay, this is real and not just the boys trying to prank us back after we got them back?
One thing was, the boys was still living in Florida. They was on their own, and they was traveling with the band around all over Florida and Tennessee, and wasn't up here when things was happening. That was one of the first things, is that where we had our trail cameras, the boys knew about, but you would walk right by them without ever seeing them. So we knew there wasn't nobody coming on this property. Not only did we have trail cameras in the woods, but we also had them on the driveway coming up in case people wanted to come in trespassing and that kind of stuff. But the way that we knew it wasn't his boys is that they was not even in the state at the time when most of this was going on.
Mm. That makes a lot of sense. Were there ever did you ever have any visuals on the property of the creatures at all?
No, not on this property I didn't.
Okay.
I have seen them.
Gotcha.
But you would sort of have to see the layout of the property. It's actually laying at the mouth of where two little valleys come down, and just one little flat spot. I mean, it was about the only place you could build a house. And the rest of it is high mountain ridges, and it is absolutely full of laurel bushes, rhododendrons. We call them laurel bushes around here. But just the lay of the land, what I have learned since then is it's hard to get above them. They're always going to have the high ground. And on his property, they seem to stay right on the ridge right behind his house, so that whenever we come in, they would know we was there as soon as we pulled into the driveway.
Did you ever Were you able to ever get any audio recorded on the property?
Not there.
Okay.
And that's one thing I kicked myself about. I was just documenting stuff on my phone. I wasn't really into researching that. I would document stuff, like footprints and what they'd break limbs over and that kind of stuff. But I never really got into the documentation and audio recording and all of that stuff until I met the guys that I'm in a group with now called Dirty South Squatching.
Nice.
And they taught me how to build recorders. Our audio recorders will record 24 hours a day for 2 weeks. And then we have to go in and change them. And so they have got me in on learning how to do that. And I have got a lot better at it, but I'm also, a lot of the times that I'm in the woods, I am actually deer hunting, hog hunting, that kind of stuff. So I ain't always got one of our pros on me and all of that stuff because it just gets too much to carry. But we do have certain research areas that have high activity, and that is where we do most of our research in that now.
Do you feel like you ever had any communication with the creatures on that property back and forth?
I do. I honestly think that they had come to accept us. Me and my dad was up there bow hunting, and it was getting that time of evening for deer and stuff to start moving. And this was in 2016, back when it was so dry that we had all the wildfires. And this is one of the few times I have ever heard one come in around me. But at first I thought it was deer. And it's in November, so all the acorns and hickory nuts and all that stuff's off the trees. And there's rocklands about 50 yards out from me. And I felt comfortable enough and been around them enough to know that they wasn't going to hurt me. Or if they was, they could have done it, years ago. So I thought, well, I'm just going to sit here and see how close they'll throw the rocks. And the next one hit about 35, 40 yards from me, and then about 20 yards, and then about 10 yards. And then the next one landed about 1.5 feet from my foot. And I thought, well, it's definitely time to go. And I'd called my dad and told him, I said, well, they're up here throwing rocks at me. It's time to go. And he told me he had never heard them do the whistle. And he was telling me where he was at, we took an old porta-john and made a blind out of it. But he hunted up closer to the feeder. And he told me, he said, there was something down at the porta-john blind and it would whistle once. And something straight above me, between me and you, it would whistle twice. And evidently what it had done was the second one that was doing the 2 whistles, it circled in around above me. And when it was time to go, they just let me know. I know it's sort of hard to figure out, but I honestly felt like that they was used to us and knew that we wasn't a threat. And when they didn't want us around, instead of being aggressive or anything like that, they would just subtly, let us know. Usually rocks being thrown or a stick thrown through the wood, top of the trees or something like that.
Did you ever try whistling back?
I do. And that is actually, when I was talking about the noose and being on the ladder, putting the feeder up, I had actually been standing there doing the whistle. And it probably wasn't 5 minutes after being up there that it threw the rock in behind us. And for some reason, and I don't know why I do it, but it has been stuck in my head, and I'll find myself just walking through the grocery store or Walmart or wherever, and I'll be doing that whistle. And I honestly don't know why, but it's just something that is stuck with me, and I actually do it when I'm in the woods and won't even realize I'm even doing it.
Is that something where you could do that right now? Maybe not directly into the phone, but to the side. It would be interesting to hear what it sounded like.
Yeah, let me get a sip of water and see if I can do it.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, that's okay. It's just a single note. It just goes. That wasn't very loud.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Oh, boy, that sounds familiar.
Yes, sir.
I've heard that. I've heard something similar in Oregon.
Yeah.
And there's a communication going back and forth, and it was the most interesting / horrifying thing I've ever seen. Just the communication between one of our group and whatever it was just in the tree line.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that sounds familiar, dude. Wow.
Well, I'm glad that you recognized it. That way they know I'm not just making something up.
No, you're not. You're absolutely not, Tim. Wow. It sounds, before we move on from this area, so it sounds like this area was sold to someone else?
No, once he died, his daughter got married, and the son-in-law started keeping things up there. So they was, I only went up there because of him being friends and doing stuff together, and there was really no reason for me to go back up there. Because his son-in-law took over and is a lot younger than both of us. So I helped him, we was always mowing and just keeping the place up. Right. And once the son-in-law took over that, so there's really been no reason for me to go back up there.
It'd be interesting to know if that son-in-law is having issues happen or things happen on that property. I would guess it didn't just go away, but you never know.
Oh, and I've talked to him, and he still gets that creeped out feeling.
Yep.
When he goes up there, like something's watching him and that kind of stuff. And one of my research areas is actually just across the ridge from his property, and that is where I saw my second one. And we get a lot of audio and that kind of stuff from that area, like I say, which is just across the ridge from Newsom's family's property. If it wasn't such a big ridge and it was just a straight line, I would say it wouldn't be not even half a mile.
Oh, okay. So I see what you did. So if you can't get in that area, just make a research area relatively close to it, and it's probably the same Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I get it. That's smart. Can you walk us through what kind of things you experienced over in that area? And it sounds like you had some actual visual sightings over there.
Yes, sir. That area, that was actually one of my main hunting places. And then once I started learning the sounds that they leave, I started recognizing it in that area. And that is when I met Bob Trent and Dwight Campbell. They're the two founders of Dirty South Squatching. And Dwight come up and went with me, and we started putting audio recorders in there. And we've got a lot of good stuff out of there. And it's on the subject, but it's one of them things that we still ain't figured out. On our audio recorder at about 2:30 in the morning, you hear what sounds like two hammerheads hitting together. And this place is about 1.5 miles back into the woods. So that's one weird thing that we've never figured out what in the world that was. But we have got good audio. We actually have them walking up and sniffing and smelling the recorder, throwing rocks at the recorder, or I'm pretty sure it was rocks. It could have been acorns, but the time of year they're probably eating the acorns instead of throwing them. Also in that area, like I was saying, I saw my second one, we were walking in one day to change all of our audio recorders out in our trail cams, and we smelt one. And just so people know, they don't smell all the time. They can do it just like a skunk does. And the reason that we know this, on multiple times we've had them upwind of us, and you'll smell them, and then they'll follow right along with you, and you'll hear them right up above you, and the wind's not changed directions, but you don't smell them. So they do not smell all the time. But we actually smelt that one, and was standing there talking about it. It was in an old growed up clear cut, and everything was quiet. There wasn't no birds making no noise or nothing. And we're standing there talking about smelling that, and I seen something move in the clear cut, and I told my buddy Dwight, I said, there's something moving in that clear cut. So we stood there and talked a little while longer, and I seen it move again. And I told him, I said, there's definitely something moving in that clear cut. And I showed him where. So he took his camera and zoomed in, and there was one behind a big berm of dirt with nothing, just its head over top. And it actually had a big green leaf across its forehead. You can see in the picture across its forehead, and you can see its eye sockets, the bridge of its nose sticking out, and the conical shape to its head. So that was the second one that I had ever seen. And that one followed us all the way in there and back out that day. And like I say, it's about 1.5 miles in there and 1.5 miles back out.
So you saw it through the camera. Did you actually see it move as well?
I seen it move. That's what got him to take his camera and zoom in.
Okay.
It was so thick that it was hard to see with the naked eye, but when he zoomed in with his camera and done just a panoramic video, you could see it.
Wow. And you could see it moving as well during that time when it was zoomed in?
Yeah.
Wow. Are those available to see anywhere, or is that private research stuff?
No, they should be. They've been posted on actually, I'll tell you, on YouTube. If you go to Dwight Campbell on YouTube, you can find the video on there. The name of it is A Deer Flush and a Bigfoot or something like that.
Okay.
I meant Deer Flush on it and Bigfoot on it. I don't remember the very exact topic, but that's close to what it is.
Gotcha. I will have to check that out later. I did find the video. I'll make sure it's linked in the show notes for this, so people can check it out.
And also in this area, I went in one morning bow hunting, and I got up to where I said that, and I actually sat close to where our audio recorder is. And it was that time of morning where I could just start walking without a flashlight. It was daylight enough to where I could see about 30, 40 yards ahead of me, good. And I'm standing there, and I take my crossbow off of my shoulder and lean it against the tree and get ready. And when I hunt on the ground. I don't hunt out of a tree stand. I sat on the ground. And so I took the crossbow off and set it down and was getting ready to take my backpack off. And there was a doe run down the hill, and I knew something wasn't right because her eyes was real big and her mouth wide open like she was being chased. And when she seen me, she stopped and looked at me for just a few seconds and then turned around and run back up the hill. She ran probably 60, 70 yards up the hill and stops and is looking up the hill and turns around and runs back down to me. Does that about 6 or 7 times, just running from me back up. And then she finally stopped about halfway, which was out of bow range. So I'm just sitting there watching her, and she's looking at me and looking up the hill like she don't know what to do. And I'm thinking, well, what's wrong with this crazy thing is the first thing that I thought. And I just kept watching her, and she finally eased out of sight off over the side of the ridge that I was on. And in about an hour after that, maybe an hour and a half, two of them come through the tops of the clear cut, and they started hollering at me. And honest to goodness, I know it sounds funny, but it sounded like they was cussing me out. And you could tell that there was two of them doing that. And I honestly think what I had done was I was walked into where the deer was supposed to run to, and the other one was supposed to be watching for it. But when I come in, it had to go hide, and that sort of messed their deer drive up.
The ones that were yelling at you, were you able to actually visually see them at that time, or just you could tell they were there because the yells were in the area?
I could just tell they was there. They was probably 200 yards from me, going back around the top of the mountain towards Newsom's side of the ridge.
Have you had multiple visual sightings in that area, or was that the main one?
No, that's the only one that I've had in that area. And we still have audio recorders and trail cams going in that area.
Have you, this is kind of maybe out of the ordinary questions here.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. And has there ever been have you ever heard anything in your mind, or has going into these areas affected your dreams afterwards?
No, not. I've never, I've heard people talk about mind speak or whatever you want to.
Right.
But I've never witnessed that. I keep telling people, and I'm not making fun of people that do, but I just tell them I must be on the wrong signal or something, because I've heard anything like that. You know, that area for it's about almost a year to the date, but that area I could not go into. I would get up there and it was just a thing of dread, just like, do not go in here. I've had that happen a couple of times, and one time it kept me from walking into a down power line one morning hunting. If I hadn't listened to it, I would have walked directly into a live power line that had the top of the pole had broke off, and it had come down, but it hadn't went low enough to touch the ground. And I'm a little over 6 feet tall, so I would have walked straight into it if I hadn't heeded that warning. So ever since then, I listened to it, and for a year I could not go into that area, and it left just as soon as it started. I do not know if maybe there was one in there that had maybe been hurt that was a threat, or one that's maybe been run off and was aggressive or what. I don't know, but I do know and that's the only place that I've ever felt that way about. But it was at least a solid year before I could go in there.
So just to clarify, during that time, you were just having a really bad feeling not to go into that area? Or were you actually hearing something that said, don't go in here?
No, it was actually just that gut feeling.
Yep.
Like, I don't, and it would almost bring fear upon me. Not that, just whatever you do not go into this area. There's other places around it that I hunted, maybe a half, 3/4 miles away. I had no problem going to those places, but it was just this one particular area.
Has there ever been a time where you're out there doing, Bigfoot related research and just things have gotten very intense in a way that you're like, we should really get out of here right now?
I've had some intense times. We have actually been bluff charged this was in another area. In the county that I live in, I have had encounters in 5 different places throughout the county. So I know there's no way that one group of them can be running from one spot to the other spot to the other spot. So there has to be at least 5 groups of them here in the county. And I was taking Dwight and a lady named Robin Moonshadow. She had come down from Canada to go with us, and I took them to a place called Scaly Mountain. It's on the North Carolina-Georgia border. And back during, we went in the winter, we went in February, but back before that, in like October, November, we was fixing a place for my dad to deer hunt. And when we come back around through the pine thicket, you could see where one had reached up and grabbed a hold of a tree and pulled the bark off of it. You could see where the thumb wrapped around the tree and where the other 4 fingers, you could see all of that clear. And I was taking Dwight and Robin up there to show them. And when you pull up, you go behind the Forest Service gate and go out a little road, maybe 150 yards. And then you go out an old logging road to your left. Well, we seen some structures on the right-hand side, so we dropped off that side, and all of those took pictures and all of that stuff. And we come back, going to go around the road to where the pine tree was that had been clawed on. And we hear something up on top of the ridge just start pitching a fit. Even the stuff up at Newsom's, I'd never heard anything like this. And it come and just kept out of sight enough to where that we couldn't see it, but we definitely heard it, and it got between us and our vehicles. And that is the only time that I've ever put my hand on my pistol. I always carry one because you never know with rabid coons and foxes and wild hogs and that kind of stuff. So I always carry it for backup. I don't think I'd ever have to use it on a Bigfoot, but it's more for the other animals. But anyway, it got in between us and our vehicle, and it was doing a sound that, if you look it up, because once I heard it, I actually went and looked up a silverback gorilla bluff charge, and it's just a like that, except it is so loud, and I mean, you feel it. It was so loud, and we just stood there. We have learned, don't run, because it's like a cat and a mouse. If you play dead, or we act like we just don't hear them, and we let them do their stuff and go on. If the mouse plays dead, the cat loses interest. And so we just stood there and let her do her thing. And then she moved on. And we went ahead, and I went out and showed them the tree, and we dropped off down where she went through, and we found some small tracks in there that might have been 5 inches long, 6 at the most. So more than likely she had, and we also found a nest down there. So more than likely she had a small one down in the nest where she could watch it from the top of that ridge. And when we started in between her and the little one, she come off and got it and moved on.
I mean, that could have been an extremely dangerous situation. I mean, just think of what happens with a normal animal in the wild. And then if you by mistake mess with the younger animal, I mean, the female mother animals can get very, very intense, and they could, I mean, in this situation, you could easily be taken out, but there's a bluff charge. So if I continue down the road that I'm going, there's a high likelihood that I'll probably get into one of those situations myself one day with a bluff charge. That must be a really intense situation where internally, is there a struggle where you're like, just run, your body's like saying just run, but you have to mentally say, don't go anywhere. Is there a back and forth going on in that situation, or?
Actually, no. And I don't know if it's because I've been in the woods so much, just like a black bear. You don't want to run from them. You stand your ground and try to look bigger And for some reason, it never entered my mind to run. And I was confident that if we just stood still, that she would on, because if they really wanted to hurt us, like I said before, there's been probably hundreds, if not thousands of times they could have done something to us and we'd have never seen it coming. And so I was pretty confident if we just stood still and let her do whatever it was that she wanted to do and let it move on, then we would probably be okay.
Gotcha. Do you ever leave, are there gifting situations that are going on in this area, or is that something that you stay away from?
I actually stay away from it, especially gifting food. I have taken a ball, and not in my main research area right now on Standing Indian. I have taken a ball that when it bounces, it lights up. And I've left that. I have left, if you look in the grocery store or Walmart, you'll see the tubs of chewing gum of like juicy fruit, that kind of stuff. And I have actually left one of those. I took all the papers off of it because I don't want to litter. But I left just one piece of gum in it, and it got to missing. The last time that we was in our research area up there, I left it looked like a plastic yellow crayon. And we honestly think we found what we called a play area up there. So I left that on top of one of the trees that they had carried in and leaned over. We're going back this Saturday to check it, so hopefully we can see if they have got it or not. But I do not ever put food out because just like bears, I don't want them to associate people with food. All my places that I do this is on public land, and I don't want me to have been carrying food in there and them get to expecting when they see people to expect food, and then somebody goes in without any and they get aggressive. And I don't think somebody would get hurt, but I think that it might scare them enough to where they wanted to hurt the Bigfoots, maybe take a shot at them or something like that. So I stay away from the food. It may work. I've got a good friend of mine that has done it, and he would go in and leave moon pies and that kind of stuff and ring a bell, and they would come in after he rang that bell and get his moon pies and stuff. So, but I just don't want to do that on public land.
Well, it sounds like what your friend is doing is he's setting up a Pavlovian response, which is, the famous experiment with I believe it's a dog in the bell in the food.
Uh-huh.
And I mean,
yeah,
there's probably a few different ways to look at that, but that's pretty incredible that he set it up that, he just has to ring a bell and literally the Bigfoot come running. That's wild.
And he's actually got videos and stuff that he's been offered $10,000 to put out. And he won't do it because he don't want, number one, he don't want them bothered. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And he's like, if we start putting stuff like this out, then everybody and their cousins going to run into the woods of thinking that they can put moon pies in a dinner bell. And if people get hurt, that's one thing, but he don't want them to get hurt either.
I'm guessing this is a gentleman who's kind of staying under the wire, probably not a big presence online, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I can give you his name. His name is Doug Teague. He was actually on the show, if I ain't mistaken, The Evidence is Out There. And it actually shows one up on the hill. Of course, the ones that was supposed to be experts on the show, that's probably somebody in a suit or something like this. And if it is, then they're bigger than Herman Munsters, all I can say.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a classic show right there.
Ever since that he put that out, And, you can tell if you spend any time in the woods and have seen him, you could tell definitely that it was one watching him. His dog got quiet, and they was like, well, if it was a true Bigfoot, that dog would go crazy. Actually, dogs will tuck their tail under them and run. I mean, the biggest, baddest dogs that there are, the Belgian Malinois. I've got a buddy that is a police officer, and he drove down the road one evening and got out to let the dog use the bathroom, and he done a whistle, and one whistle back. And when that thing whistled, he said his dog liked to have clawed the side of the car trying to get back into his police car.
Oh, wow.
So Doug, after that, he just sort of keeps to himself, and he'll give, keeps us up to date and that kind of stuff, but he just sort of quit putting anything out because he didn't want to have to put up with all the ridicule.
Absolutely. So I've been looking at a map of the different areas that you've mentioned. It looks like it's kind of down where North Carolina and Georgia and South Carolina meet, that kind of area.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, there's some big national forests down there. It's south of the Smoky Mountains National Park, but it's just, man, it's just forest and forest and forest down there.
I can, on my research area in Standing Indian, I can take you up there and let you see how vast it is. There's probably places there that nobody's ever been.
Wow.
I mean, that's how big the woods are here. Another place that you can look on your map is around Rainbow Springs, which is near Nantahala Lake. That was where I saw my very first one there. That is also an area that I was just going to say that's also an area where I've been yelled at and where I saw my very first one.
Would you be able to share about what happened the first time that you were able to see one?
Oh, yes, sir. I was in there bow hunting, and I was just minding my own business, not really thinking anything about it. I knew that what was going on over at Newsom's and that kind of stuff, but I didn't think nothing about it up there. And I was just walking up the ridge. I was going to get on the very top of the ridge and sit close to a clear cut and deer hunt. And I was walking up through there, and all of a sudden, about maybe 10 yards in front of me, it come out from behind a tree, and it run probably, I'd say maybe another 10 yards on 2 feet. And then it dropped down to all fours, and it got out of there quick. I mean, it covered 150, 170 yards in no time. I mean, by the time I looked at it, and I thought, well, I seen what it was, and then it dropped down, and I hadn't ever seen them run that fast, so I didn't know. So I looked back to see if there's another one or anything, and when I turned around, it was already gone.
When it was running on all fours, was it? Have you seen any other creature that runs like that on all fours? Was it similar to anything else?
To be honest with you, it looked like a hyena. And the reason I say that is the front end, its arms was so much longer than its back legs that it had the position of like a hyena. But it run, the best I could tell and the best I remember, it would put its 2 front hands down and then bring its back feet up just like a dog or a deer or anything, like that runs. It put its front legs out and then push off and with its back legs. And like I said, it covered some distance real quick.
That must have been a sight to see for sure. Did you, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say it was, especially when, you're just now grasping what's going on in another part of the county, not even really thinking that anything is going on anywhere else in the county. I thought it was crazy that they was in one part on my buddy's property, but then as I've done more research, found more areas, I found out that there's quite a few of them. But that first one after my buddy's property, I was like, that is, it just floors you for a minute, because then it gets you wondering, well, I wonder how many of these creatures they actually are in this county.
And is this in Macon County?
Yes, sir, it is.
So did you get a pretty good look at the head of the creature when you had that visual?
Just, it happened so fast. It come out and it had the side of its head, it wasn't looking at me. When it come out, it was looking straight ahead, and it happened so fast. It took me by surprise. I didn't get that good of a look, because I was, in my mind, it was registering like, well, what in the world am I looking at?
Understood. So probably not able, details like the shape of the head or if there was a neck to it at all?
I can tell you there wasn't no neck, because I seen that once it dropped down and was running. It looked like its head just sat on its shoulders.
When it was running, were you able to see the bottoms of the feet at all?
No, sir, because I was trying to look at its body, the shape and that.
Anything interesting about the color of it or the hair length or anything that you'd noticed?
It was, I would say, charcoal gray, maybe black. It was dark colored.
Were you able to notice anything underneath the hair at all?
No, sir. Like I said, the whole thing probably didn't last maybe 10, 15 seconds, and it was gone.
Yep, absolutely. Wow.
Now, the one that since we're talking about Rainbow Springs, me and my dad was in there, not this past turkey season, but the year before in 2023. And it was real cold that morning. And I had put an extra coat on under my clothes and was in there turkey hunting and didn't hear nothing. So I decided to hit my woodpecker call. A lot of times we'll get a response from turkeys out of that. So I hit it, and maybe 100 yards below me, a coyote started. And I thought, well, just come on up here and I'll get rid of you. And as soon as that coyote hushed, a Bigfoot hollered from the same area. And I was trying to grab my phone out of my pocket to get it recorded, and it quit. It probably lasted maybe 5-10 seconds. And just so people realize what I got on, I've got on my turkey vest, plus a light jacket, plus a long sleeve shirt and a t-shirt, and I'm trying to get through all of that. And once it quit, I thought, well, doggone. And it done it again. So I tried to get my phone out and still couldn't. And when it stopped that time, I thought, well, that's probably definitely the end of it. But it wound up hollering 4 different times. And my dad was a good 3/4 of a mile away from me. And when we got back to the truck, I got there before he did. He come out and was walking down the road to me. He said, "Did you hear that holler this morning?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "It was right in under me." He said, "Is that what I think it was?" And I told him, I said, "Yeah, it was definitely one of them." And he said, "Man alive," he said, "it just echoed out through where he was at." But that's the 2 encounters I've had in that area.
Absolutely. Just fascinating stuff from this one county. It seems like it's got a lot going on. When I talk to Harley, I've talked to Harley a few times, and I've talked to other individuals from his area. And something that I notice is that there's definitely seems to be some sort of government influence and there are unmarked cars seen and just other related things. Have you ever picked up on any out of the ordinary, cars around when you're going out to look for Bigfoot, or any weird government interference with any of your Bigfoot research down there?
I had my computer to crash. I had went to a meetup in Alabama and met a guy named Bo. And that's just his nickname. And he asked me, he said, "Have they been to see you yet?" And I said, "Who?" He said, "The men." And I said, "No, I ain't seen nobody." He said, "Well, as much as you are putting out, they will." And I just I thought, no, they ain't, you know what? I ain't that big of a person for them to be looking for anything I'm doing. But I started a TikTok account and finally got enough followers to where I could do a live show. And I told them on there, I gave them the date that I was going to do it and everything. And so my son come over and was going to help me with it. He's going to read their questions and that stuff. And he gets over here, and I'd used my laptop the day before, and everything was working fine. So we start trying to pull it up, and my laptop does nothing but sit there and spin. The little icon on it is just sitting there spinning. And finally, it gets time for us to do the live show, so we have to do it off our cell phone. And I took my computer to the computer place here in town, and he told me, he said, "Your hard drive's been fried." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "You've lost everything on it." And that was everything that I had collected from 2008 all the way up. I'm thinking that was in 2000, into 2023, 2022, 2023, somewhere around in there. And he said, everything on it's gone. He said, there's nothing that we can save off of it. And I told him, I said, well, that's okay, because I back everything up on the thumb drive. And so he went ahead and put a new everything in my computer because there wasn't nothing working. New hard drive, all motherboard, all that stuff. And I get it home and I thought, well, I'll download my pictures off of my thumb drive. I get it out, plug it into my pictures, and right there's all the folders named. When I keep my evidence, I keep it logged by the year and the location that it comes from. That way, when I want to go back and look, I can find it easier. And I started to open them up, and everything on it was gone. And that thumb drive had not been bothered since I loaded everything down on it and stuck it in the drawer underneath my computer. And how it got zapped, or whatever you want to call it, I'll never know. And I'm not saying that the government done it or nothing like that, but it's just seemed awful funny that the day that I'm supposed to go live on TikTok and answer questions, that kind of stuff, that my computer gets fried, and then all my years of research on that thumb drive also gets gone. They was in my Bigfoot folder. Not only did I keep my Bigfoot stuff, but also pictures off a trail cam of deer and hogs and all that kind of stuff. So I had probably, there ain't no telling how many thousands of pictures on that. And when I opened up the Bigfoot file, all the other ones had nothing in them. The Bigfoot file had one picture in it, and that was all. And like I say, I can't honestly say what done it, but something happened to it because it was working fine the night before. And then that day, 5 minutes before it's supposed to go live, it won't do nothing.
That is a tragedy, and really, really makes you wonder about stuff like that. What's your TikTok username?
My TikTok is Tim Dills 13.
Okay, cool. Something that listeners always, they kind of have been pushing me to ask questions related to this. So I might start to do it. And we'll come at it like this. In the areas that you research, have you ever found evidence of other creatures besides Bigfoot in those areas that are not your normal animals?
No, I've honestly not. The only thing that I have seen that is hard to explain, I have seen a ball of light moving through the woods. If you look on your map, there's a place called Boar Tree. It's off of Waya Road. That is also one of my main hunting and research areas. In that area, I have been growled at, had rocks thrown. I'll just give you a quick story on that area. I was going in, and I noticed all this stuff broke across my trail, but I was going in to change my cameras and stuff out. And I reach up and break a limb off that's about 7.5 feet high. I reach up and take my phone out and document it, of course, and break it off and throw it on the ground out of the trail. I get up into where my trail goes through a laurel thicket that I've cut a trail through. There's a stick stuck in sideways that would have hit me across the chest. And I'd get my phone back out, document that, and show that there's no way that stick could have fell there. I take it out, throw it down, go on through. I come out. It takes me about 1.5 hours to walk into this area. When I come out the other side, I'm sitting there resting a minute, and a rock comes over my head and lands out in front of me in a clear cut. And so I get my phone back out, and they just throw the rock. It landed here, and it seemed like it come from behind me, and I turned my camera around backwards and done that, and went on in and changed my stuff out and come back down. And where I broke that first limb off, there's 2 fresh limbs laid across the trail that wasn't there when I went in. I mean, they're green. You could tell they had been broken and laid down while I was gone. So I get my phone out, document them, throw them out of the way. I'm going through another little section of laurels, and it's not like the one that had the stick in it. It's small, maybe 20 feet through it. I start into it, and I hear one growl at me. And I don't have the best hearing in the world, so I knew that it was pretty close. And I thought, well, you crazy thing, I ain't got time to fool you. I've got stuff I got to do. And when I come out the other side, it growled at me again. And I thought, well, I ain't got time to fool. I just acted like I didn't hear it. And I get ready to step across this small creek branch that was there. And I look, and they had stuck a stick up between 2 trees that would have hit me across the bridge of the nose. And I get my phone out and document it, and I know definitely it wasn't there because I'd had to have moved it to walked up through there. So I get off of that old logging road and back down into the main logging road, and there's a locust tree that I have to go under. And they had broken a maple over about as big around as a softball. They had broke it over top of the locust while I was up in there. And so I'll come out and I'll document that and everything. But that is the area where I saw the light. Me and Newsom, he dropped me off and went on around the road hunting. And I went up into where I hunted up there. And I come back out, and I'm standing there, and me and him had just a few days before that bought some real bright flashlights from Walmart. They're super bright. And so I'm standing there, and I look down. It's getting dark, and I look down the hill, and I seen this orange ball about the size of a grapefruit, but it's real dull orange, almost like an old lantern color, the glow off an old lantern. And it's moving intelligently. I can tell, it's not just zipping here round and about, but it's honestly looking like it's looking for something. And I thought, well, what's he doing with that old flashlight? We got our new ones, and I know he's got it with him. And I stand there and watch it. And I thought, well, I'll go down there and see what he's looking for. So I turned my light on and shined down that way. And when I turned mine on, it goes out. And I thought, well, he'll be waiting on me. So I get down there and he's not there. And I'm thinking, well, he's going to try to jump out from behind the tree or something and scare me. And so I whistled for him, and I told him, I said, I know you're down here. I seen the light on, so let's go. And I waited, and he never did show up. And I thought, oh, well. And I got back down into the road where he let me out at, and here he comes down the road to me. And we loaded all the stuff up and everything, and we start down the road. And I told him, I said, I just seen the weirdest thing. I said, I thought it was you, but there was an orange light moving around, and it was done it intelligently, not just zipping around and everything like that. And he said, seriously? And I said, yeah. He said he was sitting in my truck talking to his wife on the phone. When he looked up in the road, something caught his attention in the rearview mirror. And he looked up, and there was an orange ball of light come from below the road. It stopped in the center of the road, and then it went up into where I was at. That's the only thing that I've seen or had up in there that, that I couldn't explain. The Bigfoot stuff is, that's easy to identify, but that was the only thing that, to this day, I still don't know what it was.
There's definitely some weird things, like stories like that come out of North Carolina for sure. I found that every state seems to have its really popular Bigfoot stories that are, or accounts that are passed around people that are interested in the community. And for example, like you have Oklahoma has a siege from early 2000, or you've got the whole account of, the Patterson-Gimlin filming from 1967 for California. Have you found that there's an account that seems to always get passed around for North Carolina to people that are interested in the state?
Yeah, there's east of from where I live. It's a few hours driving east, a place called South Mountain. They have the one there, they call it Nobby. That's the one that I think is most, if you want to use the word famous, I think that's the one that is most known in North Carolina would be Nobby.
Are there just a lot of sightings of that Bigfoot around that area, or is it overly aggressive? Or that's one I haven't heard of personally.
As far as I know, it's not aggressive. It's just that there seems to have been quite a few sightings going back, quite a few years, and still going on today. I'll
have to look into that, see if I can maybe find, if someone's from the area and they've experienced any Nobby sightings or of the history, feel free to reach out in the comments, or you can email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. But Tim, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. You are involved with way more than I would have guessed in this area. And it sounds like you have quite a crew of researchers down there that are looking into this.
Yes, sir. If you've got time, I can tell you of my most recent sighting.
I would love that. Yeah, I definitely have the time. Mm-hmm.
I actually got a pretty good look at. Back up on Standing Indian, I was going in and changing my audio recorder and my trail cams out, and was walking back out, and I thought, well, it was during deer season, so it had to be end of November, 1st of December. Well, actually, I know when it was. It was the first day of December in 2023. And I was walking back out, and I thought, well, I'm just going to sit right here and hunt till dark. And I sat down, and I always carry the Bible on my phone. I'll sit there and read my Bible, and I've been reading about an hour, just waiting on it to get, late in the evening for deer to start moving. And when I got through reading, I thought something's watching me. And I turned around and looked up on the little old ridge above me, maybe 100 yards, if that, no more than 120. And I see one standing there looking at me. It's pushing 7.5, 8 feet tall, a dark color. I can see everything but its right shoulder out from behind the tree. I couldn't see its face real good, but I could see no neck, big broad shoulders, the color of it, the conical head, not, it wasn't like a pyramid or nothing like that, but you could tell that it was more than a human's head. And I'm trying to get my phone out. I had just switched to an iPhone, and I'm trying to find out how to zoom in and all of this stuff. And I know that it's not going to last, that it's not going to stand there forever. So I throw my phone down and I pick up my rifle, and I turn around to look where it's at, because that's, when you're hunting and you learn to shoot, you keep your eyes on the target and you bring your gun up to it. So I was watching it, and when it seen me pick my gun up, it stepped back behind the tree, and all I could see was its left shoulder. And I looked and looked and couldn't see nothing but its shoulder, and I thought, well, I don't want it to think I'm going to hurt it. So I put my gun back down, and it wouldn't move. I watched for probably 3 or 4 minutes. It would just stand there with its shoulder out. And I thought, well, I'll turn around. I scooted to where I could look out the corner of my eye and watch it. And once it thought I'd turned my head, it come out from behind it, but it dropped down to all fours and crawled on its belly like an army crawl. It crawled from one clump of trees to another clump and checked to make sure I wasn't watching it. And then it crawled from there back across the little old ridge that it was on. And later, let's see, that was in December 23. No, not December 23, December 21. And then me and my wife went in there and casted after that, we casted a track in there that is 16 inches long and 8 inches wide.
Man, I can't imagine experience something like that. You must have been hardly breathing the whole time.
Actually, I'm like just excited. Like,
okay,
I finally put a good look on one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the reason I wanted to see their face up close. That's the reason I was trying to get my phone out. And then whenever I couldn't do that, that's the reason I picked my rifle up. I wanted to get real good face details. But as soon as it seen me pick up my rifle, it stepped back behind there. But I've had, and I'm not bragging, and I hope it don't sound that way, and I'm not trying to act big and macho, nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had interactions with them from nuisance property on up through. I'm not afraid. I'm just excited that I'm actually getting to see another one.
With all these years of research, do you have a goal of what you would like to try to accomplish before, in the years of research that you have left, I guess I would say?
Yeah, I would actually like to get a good video of one, not to get famous or nothing like that. I could care less about that. But I want it. We've got some pretty good pictures between me and the guys that I go with. We've got some good thermal videos, real good thermal videos. But I would like to get one just so I could pass it down to my grandkids. I'm getting ready to turn 57 Monday, so I know I ain't got a lot of years left, especially as bad as the mountains are and stuff around here. But I would like to get something that I could leave that my grandkids could, something besides the pictures, have something that they could watch and say, even if I get to take them, that would be awesome. But if not, they can look back and say, well, here's when people say they don't exist. Well, here's what my granddad found. Mm. You know, he's had all of these. I would love to get something like that more for myself. If people wanted to accept it, that's fine. If not, fine. I've been through that. I don't mean to be a jerk or nothing, but people say, are you a believer? And I say, no, I'm a knower. Right. I know they're here. And no matter how much ridicule or whatever people put on me, you know, I could care less. I'm a grown man. I get over it. But I would love to have something that I could pass down to my grandkids and maybe great-grandkids. And, you know, just to let them know, because the way the world's going, who knows what's going to be around in another 30, 40 years. There may not even be no wilderness left to even set step in.
Absolutely. No, I agree. It's a kind of a sad future unless we fix it. What kind of video setup do you have in order to try to capture that? Are you using just your iPhone or other things? Or
we've got, of course, tons of trail cameras in the woods. We use GoPros. Our thermals are AGM. Taipan, I think, is the one thermal that I got. It's a short-range thermal. Yep. My long-range thermal is ATN binoculars. They will detect a heat signature out to a mile, 1,800 yards. So that's what I use for my long range up here. Like when the leaves get off the trees, I can sit and on one ridge and watch, you know, for a long ways. And those also record. They both record video. And like I say, we've got the GoPros. We've got a little handheld. What's the camcorders? They used to be camcorders. I don't know what they're calling them now, but the little handheld camcorders, we have those. I also use trying to think of what it is, the GoPros. And then I've got one that will actually mount to my gun, but I can also mount it to anything else also that I use. And the audio recorders that we use there are Sony personal recorders, but we found a way. They usually run off of 2 AA batteries, but we have found a way to make them run off of 2 D batteries. Oh. And they will, like I said, they will record 24 hours a day for 2 weeks. And now Bob and Dwight are a whole lot more technical than I am. I still have trouble with my cell phone sometimes, but I am learning slowly but surely. But we also have the way my truck is fixed up. When we ride the back roads at night, I have on my roll bar, I have it fixed to where I can put a motor on it and attach my thermal to it so it can go 360 degrees up, down, whatever it needs to do. And we run that to laptops inside my truck. I'll have mine up there. Bob Trent will have his with suction cups mounted to the hood, and Dwight will have his either mounted or he likes to just hold his a lot. And sometimes he'll ride in the back of the truck. And that's just some of the ways we do our recordings and stuff on the back roads. When we're in the woods, Dwight looks like a walking cameraman. I mean, he's always taking pictures and videos, and we'll get done and he'll start posting them, and I'll send him a text and say, when did you take that? I didn't even see you. So he is definitely the cameraman of the bunch.
It's always fascinating to hear about a new part of a state where there's intense research going on. I'd say we can definitely say that about Macon County with you gentlemen. You guys are definitely doing some great work down there, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Tim, do you have any, as we kind of start to roll things down, do you have any final thoughts about Bigfoot or anything regarding that?
One thing is, and I forgot to mention this, But right now we have hair samples being tested at North Carolina State University.
Okay.
We have had some that Robin Moonshot took with her back to Canada and had them, and they ain't going to say there is such a thing as a Bigfoot, but if they was, it meets all the criteria. So we have got that going on also. One thing is, it's one thing to look them up on, do your research online, and that helps a lot. But getting in the woods, is the biggest thing. Be sure you're prepared, because a lot of people that see them, they don't never want to go to the woods again. And then there's idiot us that can't wait to get back in there and see if we can see another one. But the main thing is stay safe. That, it's there's a lot of things out there that besides Bigfoot, and like you said, we won't get into all of that, but there's other things out there besides Bigfoot that can cause trouble. I've actually been snake bit per head, so just be careful and enjoy it.
Absolutely. Tim, I've got one more question for you that I just thought of, and then I will let you go. When you just because you have found multiple research areas, what are criteria you keep in mind when you're trying to find a new research area?
One thing that seems, I don't know if it's coincidence or whatever you want to call it, but one thing is a food source. I have found a lot of my research areas by finding places I wanted to hunt, putting trail cameras out, finding deer in the areas, or we have quite a few wild hogs, that kind of stuff. But they have to have food and they have to have water. And that is the two of the biggest things to look for. A lot of times when I find that, I'll start deer hunting, and then as I learn more about the area, I'll start finding trees that are broke, the X's made, structures made where they've woven things together and that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing is they have to have food and they have to have water. Shelter they can make anywhere, especially around here. There's a lot of caves, a lot of rock cliffs and stuff for them to get in. Here in Macon County, I think they stay here year round. They don't migrate through. And the reason I say that, because we'll have encounters year round, have them on our audio recorders year round. But I think the biggest thing that you want to look for is a food source, because something that big has to have a lot of food.
Good advice to keep in mind when looking for a new place. But Tim, thank you so much for coming on. Are there ways that people can keep up to date with what you're doing, or are you kind of under the wire, like you're kind of just kept off to the side, or are there ways even people can reach out to you?
Oh, yes, sir. Anybody that wants to get a hold of me, they can get a hold of me here on Facebook. You can get a hold of me on TikTok. I do have a YouTube channel. It's the same as my TikTok. But if you want to get a hold of me and got questions or anything like that, since there's been so much stuff going on Facebook with fake things, just mention Bigfoot, and I'll know that you've heard it from the podcast and that kind of stuff, and I'll be more than glad to accept friend requests and chat with you anytime that you got a question or just want to chat or whatever. Just feel free. I mean, I'm not one of them that tries to stay hid. It ain't that I'm trying to make a name or nothing like that. I could care less about that, but I don't see no use in hiding either, especially if you can help other people. That's what it should be all about, helping other people and getting answers.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, thank you so much for chatting today, and we'll have to keep in touch in the future to see what you guys get into next. But thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome, and thank you. Thank you to all the listeners. And as soon as we get some information back on what the hair samples turn up at North Carolina State, I'll definitely get up with you and give you the report on that.
Absolutely. I'll be looking forward to that. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, sir, and have a great evening.
Stay tuned for a special 10-minute clip from this week's special members-only episode, Encounterpalooza 4. We've talked before, right, in messages?
Yeah.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure to talk to you. We had some really interesting conversations about probably a year or so ago. I want to say it's been a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been watching your podcast off and on throughout the year, and I've been meaning to talk to you for a while. Shoot, hopefully maybe one time we can go Bigfoot looking in Washington or Oregon sometime, maybe.
Yeah.
I'll show you some spots. I only lived up there for 29 years. But there was a time I went walking in Chehalis National Forest in Washington. And I had at that time, I had a Rottweiler for a pet. And this guy, he would go with me on the trails. And matter of fact, I think this was only the second time I had been in the Chehalis National Forest. And partners of mine, native guys, Chehalis Indians, they had all said, when you go walking on those trails, be careful. They said, when you go there, when the sun comes up and when the sun goes down. And I said, really? I said, what for? And they were looking at me. These are like two brothers and a friend of mine. They're all Chehalis natives that grew up there, cutting wood and fishing in there and hunting in there. And they said, because that's when the tall people come out. And I went, really? And this is before, I think this was probably my third run-in with a Bigfoot at this time. And it was probably a year from the last time I had a run-in with one, where I seen one. But I didn't know that they were in that forest until they said that. And they were like, yeah, when you're moving around on those trails or moving through the forest, especially those trails, they said, try not to move around in there when the sun's coming up or going down. They said, because that's when they move around a lot. And I said, oh, okay. Well, anyways, one morning, I took my dog and I was like, okay, let's go walk the trail. And just go walking through the forest, through these trails. They got trails all through that forest. And I guess, I don't want to really say it was fog. It was more mist. But it was kind of like foggy-like. But, so the mist comes in and visibility starts dropping down. And if you've ever been in that forest, it's thick. The undergrowth is thick. And bushes everywhere. Like 5-6 foot high bushes everywhere. Tall trees everywhere. And so it starts kind of getting dark real quick when that mist came in. And I guess it was probably around 7 or 8 in the morning. So it wasn't too early. And that was my thought too. I was like, well, sun has been up for a little while. It's not like it's just coming up. It's been up for a little while, so we should be good. Because, of course, I didn't want to run into him. It was just me and my dog there. So we're going down the trail. Like I said, mist comes in. Visibility starts dropping. Everything's getting wet. And in case you don't know, when it starts raining, your scent, deteriorates in the air. Animals can't smell you as far as they would when it's not raining. So that's why I think this happened, that they couldn't smell us. as far as they would have. Otherwise, they would have probably took off. But we're going down this trail, coming up over a hill, and my dog stops. And I already know when he stops, he's smelling something. And I'm looking around, and I'm thinking bear. That's what I'm thinking, because they got black bears in there, or a cougar. And I'm like, there's something around here, and he's smelling it. I'm looking around, looking underneath. I'm trying to look underneath the bushes to see anything. And when I squatted down, I heard a snap, snap, almost like a loud firecracker, like a loud M60 firecracker going off. But what it was it was a tree branch. And only thing I can think of it was the two males, because they're the only ones that I know of that break tree branches. The females, they don't break tree branches. They just run. This thing went snap in one side of the trail and then snap on the other side of the trail. And right off the back, I was like, this is a Bigfoot. There's two Bigfoots here. Because, again, cougars don't break branches. Bears don't break branches. And I'm like, oh man, they're right in front of us. And this guy, my dog, he starts whining, like crying. And he's crying beside me. And I said, yeah, let's get out of here. So I turn around. We start walking real quick. I don't run, but I start walking as fast as I can. And he's right beside me, and he keeps looking behind me. And I'm like, are they following us? Are they following us? I'm telling my dog, because he keeps looking back. I don't want to look back. I'm moving. We're fast walking up this trail and down it. And then I start hearing branches, like I should say twigs breaking behind us. Snap, 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 snap. And I'm like, oh man, these guys are following us. And sure enough, one was to the right, one was to the left of me. And they followed us for, I guess, maybe 2.5 miles down this trail back to the parking area where we parked our car. When we got about a half a mile, I guess, from the parking lot where we parked our car, where it started thinning out, there was less trees, less bushes, I should say. They weren't as high. When we got to the crest of this hill, that's when they stopped. They stopped following us. And I turned around, and all I could see was, now, from my experience of seeing pictures, reading books of different Bigfoots of different areas, there's some Bigfoots that have like a really cone head, and some, I would say, kind of like a human head. It's a little cone, but not as much. But some really have a cone head. These ones had cone heads, because I could see the top of their head over the bushes. And these are 7-foot tall bushes. So these things, I think, were squatting down. They were, trying not to be seen, but the top of their hairy heads were sticking above the bushes. And they were brown. They were brown color. And I was like, oh man, they're right there. And I knew they were watching us. I could feel it. I was like, dang. And I told them, I said, I'm not here to harm you. I said, I'm leaving now. Because up until that time, I really felt bad, like something bad was going to happen. And I was, the whole time going back, I was just hoping that they weren't going to do anything. But yeah, I felt a real bad feeling. And I guess you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, you get a bad feeling. Like, sometimes you go into a bad house or a bad area, you get a bad feel like, man, something bad is about to happen. Well, anyways, so got back to the car, took off. I ended up coming back the next day because I was like, I'm going to leave a gift for him just to let him know that I didn't, because I was walking that trail like maybe twice a month. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to be going back down that trail, and I don't want no bad problems with these people because they live there. I'm just visiting. So I went back down that trail to where that first incident happened. And sure enough, there was like 5, 6 set of footprints. There was 2 really big ones, 2 medium ones, and 1 small one. Like they had a little kid. And the ones in Chehalis National Forest, those ones that I ran into, those ones were 5-toed ones. They all had 5 toes. I think I told you before I was around Mount St. Helens.
To hear the full hour-long members-only episode, become a YouTube channel member in the Bigfoot Posse tier or above, or a Patreon member over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed. Share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.
Her and I can get on here and we can tell our stories. Maybe there's somebody else out there listening that's too afraid to tell their story. Maybe this will give them the courage to come out and not feel so bad about it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I know what I saw. I know what's out there. That's all I care about.
Please let people know. Please let them know. If you ever see one of these things, you need to tell. Because if you don't, then shame on you. You know? Shame on you.